The morning sun broke over Windsor Castle, casting long shadows across the cobblestone courtyard. Tourists gathered behind the rope barriers, cameras ready, phones raised. But no one expected what was about to happen. Sarah Mitchell stood at the edge of the crowd, her 2 young children pressed close against her legs. Emma, age 5, gripped her mother's hand tightly. Oliver, just 7, stood on his tiptoes trying to see over the adults in front of them. They had traveled all the way from Manchester for this moment. Sarah had promised her children they would see the royal guards. She had promised them a memory they would never forget. She had no idea how true that promise would become. The guards stood like statues in their red uniforms and towering bearskin hats. Their faces showed no expression. Their eyes stared straight ahead, unblinking. These were men trained to ignore everything around them, to remain perfectly still no matter what happened. Sarah watched them for a moment, then looked down at her children. Emma's eyes were wide with wonder. Oliver pointed at the nearest guard, barely 15 feet away. "Ma'am, does he ever move?" Oliver whispered. "No, sweetheart," Sarah said softly. "He has to stay very still. It's his job." But there was something Sarah hadn't told them yet, something that made this day even more important than they knew. Before you hear what happens next, if you love stories that touch your heart, hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss what unfolds here. Sarah pulled out her phone. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened the camera. She wanted just one photo. One simple picture of her children standing near the guard. A memory to hold on to. She positioned Emma and Oliver a few feet from the rope barrier. The guard stood behind them in the frame, perfectly still, perfectly composed. "Smile, my love," Sarah said, her voice catching slightly. Emma smiled brightly. Oliver gave a silly grin. Sarah tapped the screen. But then something happened. As Sarah lowered her phone, Emma slipped. Her small shoe caught on the uneven stones. She stumbled forward, her hand releasing her mother's grip. The little girl fell toward the rope barrier, her body heading straight for the guard's polished boots. The crowd gasped. Sarah lunged forward, but she was too far away. Emma's hands hit the ground first. She scraped her palms on the rough stone. Then her knee came down hard. The sound of her cry cut through the morning air. Time seemed to stop. Every tourist turned to look. Cameras lowered. Whispers spread through the crowd. And the royal guard, the man trained to never move, to never break his stance no matter what happened around him, did something no one expected. He moved, but it wasn't what anyone thought it would be. It wasn't anger or a shout or a command to step back. What happened next would make headlines around the world. It would restore faith in humanity for millions of people. It would change Sarah's life in a way she never saw coming. Because sometimes, the smallest act of kindness comes from the most unexpected person at the most impossible moment. The guard's eyes shifted downward. Just for a second. Just long enough to see the little girl on the ground, tears streaming down her face, her small hands scraped and bleeding. His jaw tightened. Something flickered across his face. Not anger. Something else. Something deeper. Then he did what every person watching thought was impossible. He knelt down. The crowd fell silent. Phones came up instantly. Dozens of cameras began recording. No one could believe what they were seeing. A royal guard in full uniform, breaking protocol, breaking years of training, breaking the very rules that defined his position. But he didn't seem to care. He lowered himself to one knee, bringing his tall frame down to Emma's level. His bearskin hat cast a shadow over both of them. His white-gloved hand reached out, steady and gentle. "You're all right, little one," he said softly. His voice was kind, warm. Nothing like the stern soldier everyone expected. "Let me see your hands." Emma looked up at him through her tears. Her bottom lip quivered. Slowly, she held out her scraped palms. The guard examined them carefully. He pulled a clean white handkerchief from inside his jacket. With movements so gentle, they seemed impossible from a man so large and imposing, he dabbed at the small cuts. Sarah stood frozen. Her heart pounded in her chest. She wanted to rush forward, to grab her daughter, to apologize. But something stopped her. Something about the way this stranger looked at Emma. Like she mattered. Like she was the only person in the world at that moment, Oliver watched his sister with wide eyes. He had never seen a royal guard move before. He thought they were like the toy soldiers in his room, stiff, frozen. But this man was real, and he was helping Emma. "There we are," the guard said, his voice still soft. "Not too bad, is it? You're very brave." Emma sniffled. Then, to everyone's surprise, she spoke. "Does it hurt?" she asked, pointing at his uniform. "Standing so still all day?" The guard's lips curved. Just slightly, almost a smile, but not quite. Professional, controlled, yet somehow full of warmth. "Sometimes," he admitted. "But do you know what helps?" Emma shook her head. "Knowing that people like you come to visit," he said. "Knowing that little girls with bright smiles are watching. That makes it easier." The crowd around them had grown. More tourists pushed forward, trying to see. Cameras clicked and flashed. Videos recorded every second. But the guard paid them no attention. His focus remained entirely on the small child in front of him. He helped Emma to her feet. His hand supported her elbow as she stood, making sure she was steady. Then he looked at her scraped knee. "You will need to have your mum clean that properly," he said. "But I think you'll survive." "You're a tough one," Emma nodded. Her tears had stopped. A small smile appeared on her face. Then the guard did something else unexpected. He reached up and adjusted his tall, bearskin hat. He straightened his red jacket, and he looked directly at Sarah. His eyes were kind, understanding. There was no judgment in them. No frustration at the disruption. Just compassion. "She's all right, ma'am," he said to Sarah. "Just a little tumble. Nothing serious." Sarah's throat tightened. Words caught there, refusing to come out. She managed a nod. Tears blurred her vision. "Thank you," she finally whispered. "Thank you so much." The guard gave a small nod. Then he looked back at Emma. "Would you like to stand next to me for a proper photo?" he asked. "One where everyone's on their feet this time?" Emma's face lit up. She looked at her mother with hopeful eyes. Sarah couldn't speak. She simply nodded again, raising her phone with shaking hands. But what the guard did next wasn't just kind. It was something that would remind the world what true honor really means. The guard stood back up to his full height. He returned to his position, his posture perfect once again. But then he did something subtle. Something small. Something that made all the difference. He shifted his stance. Just slightly. Just enough to angle his body toward Emma. It was an invitation. A silent way of saying she was welcome. That she belonged there. Emma moved closer, her earlier fear completely gone. She stood right beside his polished boots, looking up at him with admiration. Oliver rushed over too, not wanting to miss the moment. Sarah raised her phone. Her hands still shook, her vision still blurred with tears. But she steadied herself and took the photo. Click, the image captured everything. Two small children standing beside a towering royal guard. Emma's scraped knee visible. Oliver's wide smile. And the guard, standing tall and proud. But with something in his expression that cameras rarely caught. Gentleness, humanity. The crowd erupted in applause. People clapped and cheered. Strangers wiped their eyes. Several tourists were openly crying. In a world that often felt cold and divided, this moment reminded everyone of something important. Kindness still existed. Compassion still mattered. And sometimes it came from the most unexpected places. But Sarah knew something the crowd didn't. Something that made this moment even more powerful. She lowered her phone and looked at the guard. He met her eyes briefly. Just for a second. And in that second, Sarah saw understanding. He somehow knew. Maybe not the details. Maybe not the full story. But he understood that this moment meant more than just a photo. "Thank you," Sarah said again, her voice stronger this time. "You have no idea what this means." The guard gave the smallest nod. Then his face returned to its neutral expression. His eyes looked forward again. His body became still. He was back on duty. Back to being the statue everyone expected, but Emma and Oliver would never see him that way again. To them, he would always be the kind man who helped when it mattered most. Sarah guided her children back through the crowd. People patted her shoulder as she passed. Strangers smiled at Emma and Oliver. The warmth of the moment spread through everyone there. They found a bench near the castle wall. Sarah sat down and carefully examined Emma's knee. It wasn't bad. Just a scrape. It would heal quickly. But the memory would last forever, Emma said quietly. Why did he help me? I thought guards weren't supposed to move. Sarah brushed a strand of hair from her daughter's face. How could she explain this? How could she make a 5-year-old understand? Because some things are more important than rules, Sarah said softly. That man knew you needed help. And when someone needs help, truly needs it, the right choice is always to be kind. Oliver leaned against his mother's side. He was nice, he said simply. Yes, Sarah agreed. He was very nice. She looked back at the guard in the distance. He stood perfectly still now. Tourists continued to take photos. Life went on as normal. But for Sarah, nothing felt normal anymore, because 3 months ago, Sarah had received news that shattered her world. News that made every moment with her children feel precious. News that made her desperate to create memories they could hold on to. The doctors had found something. Something serious. Something that might not give her much time. Sarah had undergone surgery. She had started treatments, but the prognosis wasn't good. The timeline was uncertain. She might have years. She might have months. No one could say for sure. That's why this trip mattered so much. That's why this photo meant everything. That's why she had been trembling when she raised her phone. She needed her children to have something to remember her by. Something beautiful. Something that showed them she had tried to give them everything she could in whatever time remained. And that guard, without knowing any of this, had given them exactly what they needed. Not just a photo, but a memory of kindness. A reminder that the world held good people. A story they could tell for the rest of their lives. Sarah pulled both children close. She kissed the tops of their heads. She breathed in the smell of their hair. She felt the warmth of their small bodies against hers. I love you both, she whispered. So very much. But the story wasn't over. What happened next would prove that small acts of kindness have a way of rippling outward in ways no one can predict. They spent the rest of the day exploring Windsor. They ate ice cream despite the cool weather. They walked along the river. They laughed and played and made the most of every moment together as evening approached. Sarah's phone began buzzing constantly. Message after message. Notification after notification. She pulled it out, confused. Her social media was exploding. Someone in the crowd had posted the video. The moment when the guard knelt down to help Emma, the gentle way he tended to her scraped hands, the kindness in his eyes, the photo opportunity he offered, the video had gone viral. Millions of views in just a few hours. Comments poured in from around the world. People shared it everywhere. News outlets picked it up. Headlines appeared across different countries. Royal Guard breaks protocol to help. Injured child moment of pure kindness at Windsor. Castle goes viral. Guard's gentle response restores faith in humanity. Sarah sat on the train back to Manchester, reading comment after comment. Her children slept against her shoulders, exhausted from the long day. The countryside rolled past the windows in the fading light. The comments made her cry. This is what real strength looks like. That guard is a hero. Not for standing still, but for knowing when to move. My faith in humanity is restored. If more people acted like this, the world would be so much better. Sarah thought about the guard. She wondered if he knew. She wondered if he had seen the video. She wondered if he understood how much his simple act of kindness had touched the world. But more than that, she wondered if he knew how much it had meant to her. To her children? To their story. The next morning, Sarah woke to a knock at her door. She wrapped her robe around herself and shuffled downstairs. Emma and Oliver still slept in their beds. She opened the door to find a courier holding a package. Sarah Mitchell, he asked. Yes. Delivery for you. Needs a signature? Sarah signed, confused. She wasn't expecting anything. She took the package inside and set it on the kitchen table. The return address made her hands freeze. Windsor Castle, her heart pounded. She opened the package with trembling fingers. Inside was a letter on official stationery, and beneath it, something that made tears stream down her face. The letter read, "Dear Mrs. Mitchell, it has come to our attention that you and your children visited Windsor Castle yesterday. We have seen the video that is circulated online. We have read the comments from people around the world. The guard in question, Sergeant James Morrison, has served Her Majesty's Guard for 12 years with distinction. When asked about his actions, he said something that moved us all deeply. I saw a child who needed help, he said. Nothing else mattered in that moment. Not protocol. Not rules. Not my duty to remain still. My duty was to be human first." Sergeant Morrison exemplifies the true spirit of service. He has been commended for his actions rather than disciplined. He has shown that honor and compassion are not opposites, but partners. We understand from conversations with witnesses at the scene that this visit held special significance for your family. We hope the enclosed brings you and your children joy, with respect and best wishes. The letter was signed by someone high-ranking in the royal household, but Sarah barely registered the signature because beneath the letter was a photograph. The photograph. The one she had taken. But it had been professionally printed and mounted in a beautiful frame, and at the bottom, handwritten in careful script, was a message. To Emma and Oliver, two of the bravest visitors I've ever had the honor of meeting. May you always remember that kindness is the truest form of strength. With admiration, Sergeant James Morrison, Sarah collapsed into a chair. Sobs shook her body, but they were good tears. Healing tears. She had wanted to give her children a memory, but she had received so much more. She had received proof that goodness still existed in the world, that strangers could be kind, that one moment of compassion could ripple outward and touch millions, and she had received confirmation that her children would be okay, even after she was gone, even when she could no longer hold them. The world held people like Sergeant Morrison, people who would help a fallen child, people who would choose kindness over rules. Her children would be okay. But the story still had one more twist. One more moment that would prove just how far a single act of kindness could reach. Emma and Oliver woke to find their mother sitting at the kitchen table, tears streaming down her face, holding a framed photograph. They rushed to her side, worried. "Mom, why are you crying?" Oliver asked. Sarah pulled them both into her arms. She held them tight. Then she showed them the photograph and read them the message from Sergeant Morrison. Emma traced her finger over the handwritten words. "He remembered us," she whispered in wonder. "He did more than remember you," Sarah said. "He cared." The framed photo found a place of honor on the living room wall. Every day, Sarah and her children looked at it. Every day, it reminded them that kindness existed, that people cared, that the world still held magic. But then something else happened. A week after the package arrived, Sarah received a phone call. A producer from a morning television show wanted to interview her. They wanted to hear her story. They wanted to know why that moment had meant so much. Sarah hesitated. She was a private person. She didn't want attention. She didn't want pity. But then she thought about all the comments she had read. All the people who said the video had restored their faith. All the parents who said they showed it to their children as an example of how to be kind. Maybe her story could help others. Maybe sharing it could spread even more light. She agreed to the interview. The morning of filming, Sarah sat in a television studio with bright lights and cameras. The host was kind. The questions were gentle. Sarah told her story. She talked about her diagnosis, about wanting to create memories, about the moment Emma fell, about the guard who chose kindness. She cried on national television. But she didn't feel embarrassed. She felt free. When the interview aired, something incredible happened. Donations poured into cancer research foundations in Sarah's name. People sent cards and letters to her home. Strangers shared their own stories of unexpected kindness. Teachers showed the video in classrooms. Parents talked to their children about what real strength meant. But the most surprising response came from Sergeant James Morrison himself. He reached out through official channels and asked if he could meet Sarah and her children again. Properly this time, not as a guard on duty, but as the man behind the uniform. Sarah said yes. They met at a small cafe in London. Sergeant Morrison arrived in civilian clothes. He looked different without his red uniform and towering bearskin hat. Younger, more approachable. But his eyes held the same kindness. Emma ran to him immediately. She hugged his legs without hesitation. Oliver followed, less bold, but equally happy to see him. The sergeant knelt down, just like he had that day at the castle. "Hello again," he said warmly. "How's that knee?" Emma pulled up her pants leg to show him. The scrape had healed completely. Only a faint mark remained. "Good as new," she declared proudly. "I'm glad," he said. Then he looked up at Sarah. "And how are you?" Sarah felt tears prick her eyes again. "Better," she said honestly. "Much better." They sat together for over an hour. They talked and laughed. The sergeant told stories about his time in the guard. Emma and Oliver listened with wide eyes. He was patient with their questions. He never checked his watch. He never seemed rushed. At one point, when the children were distracted by coloring pages a waitress had brought, Sarah leaned forward. "Why did you do it?" she asked quietly. "Why did you break protocol?" Sergeant Morrison was quiet for a moment. He stirred his coffee thoughtfully. "I have a daughter," he said finally. "She's about Emma's age. And when I saw your little girl fall, when I heard her cry, I didn't see a tourist. I didn't see a disruption. I saw someone's child who needed help. I saw my own daughter in her." He looked at Sarah with serious eyes. "I joined the guard to serve," he continued. "To protect. To honor. But those words mean nothing if they're just about standing still and looking impressive. Real service means knowing when to move, when to help, when to be human." Sarah's throat tightened. "The interview," she said. "You saw it?" He nodded. "I did. And I want you to know something." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "What you're doing for your children, the memories you're creating, the love you're giving them, that's the most important service in the world. You're a better soldier than I'll ever be." Sarah couldn't hold back her tears. They fell freely. The sergeant reached across the table and held her hand for a moment. A simple gesture, a human connection. "They'll remember you forever," he said gently. "Not because of photos or trips, but because of who you are, the mother you've been. That never fades." And in that moment, Sarah understood something profound. She understood that kindness doesn't just help the person receiving it, it transforms the person giving it to, connects souls across distances. It reminds everyone that we're all human. It's all fragile, all in need of help sometimes. The sergeant became a friend to their family, not in a constant way, not in a way that demanded time or attention, but in a steady, reliable way. He sent cards on birthdays. He checked in with messages. He remained a gentle presence in their lives. Months passed. Sarah's health fluctuated. Good days and bad days. Treatments and rest. Hope and fear. But through it all, she had the photograph on her wall. The memory of that moment. The proof that the world held more kindness than cruelty. One afternoon, nearly a year after their first meeting, Sarah sat in her living room with Emma and Oliver. They were looking through photo albums together, something they did often now. "Tell us the story again, Mom," Emma asked. "About the guard." Sarah smiled. She had told this story dozens of times, but she never tired of it. "Hugh fell," Sarah began, "and I was so scared. But then he moved. Even though he wasn't supposed to," Oliver added. "He knew this part by heart." "Even though he wasn't supposed to," Sarah agreed, "because sometimes the right thing matters more than the rules." Emma looked at the framed photograph on the wall. "Do you think he knew?" she asked. "That you were sick?" Sarah thought about this. It was a question she had asked herself many times. "I don't know," she said honestly. "Maybe not the details. But I think he understood that the moment mattered. That kindness always matters." "Are you still sick, ma'am?" Oliver asked quietly. Sarah pulled both children close. This was harder to answer. The truth was complicated. Prognosis had improved. The treatments were working better than expected. She might have years instead of months. But nothing was certain. Nothing was guaranteed. "I'm fighting," she said. "Every day I'm fighting. And you know what helps me fight?" "What?" Emma asked. "Knowing that you two will grow up in a world where people like Sergeant Morrison exist. Where strangers help little girls who fall. Where kindness wins." She kissed their heads, knowing that you'll both be kind too. That you'll help others when they fall. That you'll make the world better. "We will," Oliver promised seriously. "We promise," Emma echoed. As evening fell, Sarah tucked her children into bed. She read them stories. She sang them songs. She did all the normal, beautiful, ordinary things that mothers do. But she did them with full awareness of how precious they were. How miraculous. How brief. Later, alone in her room, Sarah looked at the photograph one more time. She thought about that day, about the crowd, about Emma's fall. About the moment when a stranger became a hero, simply by being kind. She thought about all the people who had watched the video. All the lives that had been touched. All the conversations it had started. All the kindness it had inspired. One moment. One choice. One person deciding that compassion mattered more than protocol. And from that single moment, ripples had spread across the world. Sarah understood now that this was the real lesson. Not that she needed to create memories for her children. They would remember her regardless. Love leaves marks that time can't erase. The real lesson was about what we leave behind in the world. The kindness we show, the strangers we help, the moments when we choose humanity over rules. Sergeant Morrison had given her children more than a photograph. He had given them an example, a template for how to live. A reminder that we all have. The power to change someone's day, someone's life, someone's world with a single act of compassion. And Sarah had learned that even in her darkest moments, when fear threatened to overwhelm her, the world still held light. It held people who cared, held unexpected grace. She fell asleep that night with peace in her heart. Years would pass. Sarah's health would stabilize. She would watch her children grow. She would see Emma start school, and Oliver learn to ride a bike. She would have more time than the doctors initially thought possible. But no matter how many years she gained, no matter how many new memories she created, that moment at Windsor Castle would always hold special power. Because it was the moment she learned that we're never truly alone, that kindness connects us all, that in our most vulnerable moments, strangers can become angels. And it was the moment her children learned the most important lesson of all, that true strength isn't about standing still or following rules or appearing perfect. True strength is knowing when to move, when to help, when to kneel down and tend to a scraped knee, when to choose love over everything else. That guard, that stranger in a red uniform, had changed their lives with one simple choice. He had restored their faith. He had given them hope, and in doing so, he had reminded the entire world of something we all forget sometimes, that we're all capable of extraordinary kindness. We all have the power to be someone's miracle. We just have to choose it. In the small moments, in the unexpected times, when someone falls and needs help, we just have to move.